We've been focusing in Africa for the last few years, as Dubai being quite well known as the gateway for the Gulf region, the gateway for the Middle East, and we are positioning Dubai more and more to be the gateway of Africa. Africa being always the focus of our international activities. For the last 4 years, we've been hosting a major events here in Dubai. We call it the Global African Business Forum, and this is an annual event. We host more than 3,000 people coming from not only most of the African nations, but also we promote these events to be able to attract investors from all over the world to meet the Africans in Dubai, to be able to understand more about Africa and the business opportunities in Africa. I think one of the misconceptions many investors has with Africa, that they deal with Africa as one country. But it's very important to know that Africa is more than 50 countries. This is very key to us to raise more information about Africa, raise more information about the opportunities in Africa. Africa is the home for the world's fastest growing economies. The middle class is growing, and their consumption is growing, and they are importing a lot, and also there are more and more investments going on over there. Dubai has the close proximity to Africa. We have the infrastructure in terms of the connectivity, and this is something we've been addressing it quite well during all of the events that's happening with Africa in the past number of years.
This way, right? Thank you.
Okay, we're good to go, are we? Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, good to be back with you. What brings increasing numbers of international and African companies to Dubai? What does it have to offer beyond the obvious, the geographic location, the ease of doing business, efficient coordination, access to finance and international markets? What's the attraction here, and what could Dubai do to position itself if it wants to be the natural hub for African business? How does it stack up against some powerful rivals for that title? Those are the questions we hope to answer for you over the next 40 minutes or so. With our panelists, they are Ashish Thacker, who's founder and chief executive of Mara Group and Mara Foundation; Anand Kapoor, founder and group vice chairman of Midcom; Roland Agambire, group chairman and group chief executive of Agams Holdings; and Gulam Balam, chief economist and head of Standard Bank Research at the Standard Bank Group. Please welcome them. Before we throw it open to a general discussion, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to talk for 5 or 6 minutes about their business in Africa and the role Dubai plays in it. But please do have your questions ready at various points during the next 40 minutes. We're going to come to you to ask questions. Again, it does depend on you. We want to make sure you get out of this discussion exactly what you want. These are important people. We don't have them very often together in the same place, so please make the most of it. Ashish Thacker, why don't you kick off? A bit about your business here.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everybody. I founded the Mara Group in Dubai about 18 years ago. and the group is only focused on doing business in Africa. Today, we have presence in over 22 countries in sub-Saharan Africa with 11,000 employees. We started in Dubai 18 years ago with the basis that my family got kicked out of Uganda in 1972. We were refugees during the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. We lost everything, and I set up a business. I quit school when I was 15 years old and set up a business with $5,000. I couldn't get credit as an African company from suppliers abroad. And I was advised that if I set up a base in Dubai and become a Dubai company, I can actually get credit. So in 1996, I set up a base here on the Computer Street, Khalid bin Walid Street, and that's how the business began. And at that time, it was more, I set up in Dubai because of convenience, because I was getting credit as an African business. Today, we're in Dubai out of choice. As I said, having presence in over 22 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, I'm a firm believer, and I've said this for many, many years, that the UAE is a fantastic hub for doing business in Africa, and there's several reasons for that. I think firstly, the fact that Dubai connects the world so well. I mean, it's credit to obviously Emirates Airlines and what has been achieved, but the fact that Dubai connects Africa with Asia, with Europe, with the US is extremely convenient. Secondly, operating businesses in Africa, out of Dubai, the biggest advantage again we have, and we're trying to address this as Africa, but it's the fact of migration. Today, our migration policies on the continent are challenging. For Africans to travel within Africa is not easy.
They can't get visas.
Getting visas to countries of our own is challenging. As a British citizen or as an American citizen, you can travel more freely on our continent than we can as Africans. However, operating out of Dubai, you can actually bring people here within 3-4 days, get visas for any nationalities and have them in your head office. Ease and the convenience of doing business, again, on the continent, out of Dubai is extremely convenient. Johannesburg doesn't offer that.
Really?
London doesn't offer that.
From all African countries?
A lot of them. And
a lot of them, but some it still takes time.
But then the other side of connectivity comes about, right? Not all of them connect you with the rest of the world. So I think you've got to look at it on a practical ease of doing business. Our group does no business apart from Africa. We're 100% focused on Africa. But we're headquartered out of Dubai, and it's actually extremely convenient and efficient to be so.
Okay, Anand Kapoor.
Thank you, Tim. I must first congratulate Dubai Chamber of Commerce to identify this amazing potential of Africa and bringing all these stakeholders all across the world and open up such an open forum whereas we can discuss how we can make Dubai as a hub for one of the most growing potential continent, Africa. I also had a very humble beginning. I was a banker by profession, had a lot of dreams to fulfill in early age of life, left the bank in close to 6 to 7 months, started with foreign exchange, acquired a flower farm with the money I made in foreign exchange, and likewise, I today have expanded into quite a bit of strategic sectors, telecommunication being one, where we are now in 17 countries. We sell close to 60 million handsets. That's almost 500,000 handsets a day on the working days. We expanded into consumer electronics. I have very recently set up one of the largest plant together with Samsung in Nigeria, outside South Africa, which assembles close to 1 million TVs in a year. Nobody can ignore the fact of agriculture opportunities. The flower farm that I set up 11, 12 years back is still exporting roses to Holland. And in a very remote place of Uganda, where the milk was in abundance, we set up state-of-art milk processing plant. It processes today 500,000 liters of milk a day. And this has brought the entire community revolution in that part of Uganda. So a lot of speakers have talked about the opportunities in Africa. And likewise, I will also share this with you, that there is so much of abundance of natural resources lying in Africa, whereas small value additions will bring a lot of revolution in the country as well as in terms of business. 2003, where we also had ambitions to expand to West Africa, it was a very strategic call the group had to take, where we will choose to have our headquarters. And we are fortunate enough to follow our discussion after Mr. Tim Clark has briefed the amazing connectivity to Africa, what Emirates has created. And to my level, I would say a very comfortable connectivity. So 2003, we moved to Dubai. What we realized, I think Dubai welcomes you with an open arm and eases up all the roadblocks that you ever believe you will need to establish your business for. We started from airport-free zone. Today I have got close to 50,000 square feet of office space, and I have got close to 200,000 square feet of warehousing space in Middle East, which is catering to 17 countries. Very obvious reasons we all have talked about, the connectivity, the logistical ease, and one thing which I have now discovered and which wasn't even thought of, that because Midcom is based in Dubai, it adds on to a lot of brand value of Midcom. What Ashish has been saying, that people were ready to give you credits or other things, but as a brand, that Midcom headquarters in Dubai eases out a lot of these introduction hiccups for us. Finally, my human resource department has complimented me that to bring the manpower, the choicest manpower, to convince them to work with us in Dubai has become a lot more easier. They are very comfortable to shift with their families, thanks to the environment which is here, a very cosmopolitan environment, good education, ease and security. So a lot more easy to recruit and have a very quality brain power sitting in Dubai.
Okay, so what doesn't work?
I'm sorry?
What doesn't work? Nowhere's perfect. What doesn't work here?
So what doesn't work here is, we believe we are in the early stages of perception for Africa, the way financial institutions will perceive the companies working in Africa. So ease and availability of finance to work for Africa is not so easy. Still, that needs to mature.
And what about contract enforcement here? It's very low down on the scale on ease of doing business. The World Bank report, the World Bank index, it's about 100th.
I think the small progress that has been made in the last couple of years.
Contract enforcement.
Contract enforcement. The small progress, what I believe has been done in a couple of years, is that you can choose to have your contracts to be registered in DIFC courts. Whereas, you can then be reviewed under the international treaties and laws, which I believe is a bit of progress. But I believe a lot of improvement needs to be done in what you're trying to highlight.
And investor protections. They lag behind in investor protections. Again, it's about 100th in the world, based on the World Bank rankings.
Like I said, the transformation is happening.
That's not important, investor protection?
It is very important. It is very important so that the international companies will have the courage to invest here. Things like bankruptcy laws are not there. Investor protection is not there. And I recently read in the news...
These are pretty crucial aspects.
Very crucial aspects. Very crucial aspects for long-term sustainability. Very crucial aspects because if those environments will not be improved, it will be very difficult then to sustain this kind of growth in future.
Ashish Thakur, you share that view?
I think I look at it differently in the sense that I see the Dubai as a fantastic operational, in terms of operational convenience, it's the perfect hub. My bank, my partner Bob Diamond and I set up a bank focused on buying banks in Africa. We listed on the main board of the London Stock Exchange in December, just about 9 months ago. We raised $1 billion, a combination of debt and equity for Africa. But we're listed on the London Stock Exchange. We're an offshore listed company. But however, we're operating out of Dubai, and we're operating obviously on the continent. But I think another very important point, Tim, you've got to realize that running Africa out of anywhere outside the continent is not practical. But another thing, I'm going to take it a step
It's
further.
not practical long term, is it?
It's not even practical short term. On a practical note, trying to run the Southern African region out of South Africa is not practical. Trying to run the West African region out of Nigeria is not practical. And trying to run East Africa as a broad community outside of Kenya, is not practical, in my opinion.
But it should be in the future, shouldn't it?
But when
Isn't that what Africa is aiming at?
No, but we're looking at regional integration, but you have to be practical. We are 46 different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. We all have our own histories, cultures, politics, and parliaments. If you ask me, out of the 22 countries that we have presence in Africa, where are my regional offices? My head office is Dubai, and my regional offices are in the 22 countries that we operate in. Because you have to operate very locally.
But
and I
isn't
think
it
that's
a
important.
huge indictment that you have to come to a place like Dubai or choose another
Not
hub
necessarily.
actually outside? Long term, Africa wants its hub in Africa, doesn't
And
it?
I think we're creating our hubs. I mean, Johannesburg has been great to an extent, but now obviously trying to operate from Johannesburg for the rest of the continent, it's actually easier to go to West Africa from here than it is from there in some cases. And in terms of convenience, again, it's on the
That's why I say
operational...
long term. Long term, the considerations are different.
But hence, Tim, I'm emphasizing the fact of operational convenience. When
now.
operating in Africa, you have to operate locally in each country. We can't think theoretically. We cannot be generalized as a continent. We have to operate in a local manner. But operational convenience on an overall basis, I think Dubai in the short to medium term and even potentially long term is a brilliant hub.
What about the issues of investor protection?
I just said, I mean,
Contract enforcement.
I've raised $1 billion, but I'm not registering, I'm not raising it on the DFSA capital, on the capital markets in Dubai. I listed on the London Stock Exchange, and 90% of my investors are institutional investors out of the United States. So I'm bringing in institutional capital onto the continent. I don't need to raise it from the Middle East. So again, it's operational convenience. I'm not listing on the local stock exchanges here. I'm not here for financial convenience.
So
I'm here
if
for
Dubai
operational
wants to be a
convenience.
hub for Africa, Dubai, what's it got to do?
I think it's doing operationally convenient, operationally convenient, it's doing a fantastic job. I think on the financial capital markets, there's a lot more that needs to be done generally. We need to do a lot more on our local exchanges. We need to do a lot more. The London Stock Exchange needs to do a lot more to become more Africa savvy and more Africa friendly. And so does Dubai. I think all capital markets need to improve when it comes to doing business on the continent and raising structured institutional capital for the continent.
Okay, Roland Agambere, what brought you to Dubai?
Personally, there are two key things that brought me to Dubai. On a personal mantra, it's about the dream and the reality of what exists today in Dubai. On the business front, it's about two things: the lion and the gazelle story about Dubai. And on the lion and the gazelle story, there are about 6 key things that I'll delve into. But looking at Dubai as a city, we all make a mistake, and everybody that comes into Dubai have a feel that Dubai is UAE. That is one significant thing.
That Dubai is what? Sorry?
UAE. And this is one significant thing, and this is what this city is influencing the overall existence of the UAE, unfortunately. But that is the reality. You have 1.7 million people in Dubai. Out of this, 13% are Emiratis, and a whole lot are mixed migrants, and I'm one of them. Now on the personal dream and reality, where today one of my most ambitious projects for Africa, and as you mentioned, what will be the reality and strategy for Africa to translate a city like Dubai one day in Africa is what I'm living and trying to be closer to the dream of what Dubai has done over the last 40 years. Hope City is a 10 billion city to be built in Ghana. This is veered on the fact that I have come to live, operate globally. And last year, as I was here on a summit of this nature, I said Dubai was a global hub, but was not a gateway to Africa. But that Ghana is to manifest the gateway to Africa. And this was key because I want to live the dream of what Dubai has done over the 40 years, but it is out of that mantra of the lion and the gazelle story that has created Dubai as it is today. I'm able to talk to close associates who have created this environment of Dubai. Dubai was created by same individuals, human beings like us. And therefore, that opportunity of creating such an amazing city that has an influence within the UAE and has made a huge hub of easing up in terms of transportation, as my colleagues mentioned. Today, when you look at the timing zone of Dubai, I do not have to wake up very late in my country and have to deal with other parts of the world in closing up business. One, you are 4 hours ahead of Asia, of Europe and Africa. 43 hours. Asia is about 5 hours. America, 11 to 8 hours ahead, behind. Now, if you look at all these things, what happens if I'm working within 12-hour clock turnaround time? I'm able to close business decently at the end of the day. But in terms of transportation as a global hub, what challenges do I face if I was going to do redistribution of products? One of my company that has pioneered the production of African ICT products, mobile phones, computers across today in Africa. We have our global operations right here in Dubai to be able to redistribute across the rest of Africa. 2 weeks down the line, you are able to transport through sea across wherever you are going. If I was going to transport within Ghana as a brand that was born in that country, it takes me longer period than if I'm redistributing within Dubai. Because from China, we have huge operations in China as well that we use Dubai as our central point of redistribution. But what is the mantra of the lion and the gazelle story that would allow...
I was hoping you'd tell us more about this story.
Yes. Allow an energized society like we in Africa to change the perception that we cannot do business in Africa using the Dubai history, is that we have all the opportunities and the options. If it is about natural resources, if it's about the business environment, if it's about the people. The inhabitants of Dubai is 9.7 million. In my country, I have 24 million people. So it's enough for me to do more business in my country. But what makes Dubai unique is the fact that you wake up and you have to run. You wake up and whether you like it or not, the lion is after the gazelle. The gazelle must run to feed. And that is what is energizing me every day, to look at Africa as an opportunity. But using Dubai as the destination that has lived it, living the dream closer to the dream is important. Now, most of my staff, when you talk about human resource, this is the only place you can find different race of people and be able to translate that back into Africa. I have employed a lot of expatriates. These people are back in Africa working in various companies for me. They've learned a certain culture outside their countries, but they saw Dubai as an opportunity to live in. And I'm looking at, why won't I translate this in a city like Hope City tomorrow that will influence the culture of all these people who want to live and work in Africa? And that is one key thing. When you look at the security aspect of the UAE.
What are you saying? You're talking about working conditions here?
Yes.
Being an example for other countries in Africa?
Definitely.
Including construction workers?
Including construction workers.
Really? With all the bad publicity that Dubai has had over the treatment of construction workers?
But you see, Dubai is growing. It's a city. Look at the roads. Look at the buildings. These are the same people building them. And it's a matter of teamwork. It's a matter of...
So you're saying it doesn't matter whether they're badly treated or not?
What happens is that there's no perfect condition. What you need to do as an entrepreneur is to change people.
There may not be perfect conditions. There can be better conditions, can there?
Yeah, but you have to make sure those better conditions translate into your vision. The guy working as a contractor or a laborer for you does not understand the end product. But what does it do? You design the idea, and you make sure that idea is manifested. But what is happening? He has learned a lot of the mistakes that probably had happened here. When he is carried into another country, he knows what he has learned already. You're not going to reinvent the wheel. You want to continue the legacy. Because if this city was not great, it will not be influential. And that is what is key. So I'm looking at what are the positive underpinnings that makes Dubai a great city, that makes Dubai a global hub for me.
Well, according to Panelists, it's not the treatment of immigrant workers or construction workers, is it? That's not what's made Dubai great. That's not what's done much for its reputation, has it?
No, no matter where you go, everybody will have a challenge. And for me, the challenge is having learned, taking your mistakes into consideration and being able to work over and overcome those mistakes. Because Dubai is seen as a desert point. This is a bare land created today as a city. What else do you expect if no mistakes? I have a country over 50, 60 years, having not a bare land, but having been built from colonial masters, but we've been able, Dubai has become an example. So if I'm going to look at the two variant points, which I know, yes, in Africa, there are a lot of opportunities that are more worthy to mention, but yet we're going to translate what has happened in Dubai over the last 40 years. I used to come to Dubai from 15 years ago, and haven't seen the growth and the tremendous change that has happened. Downtown was not there. It was just an empty space. Those days you get to the airport, and there was nothing like the Burj Khalifa building. What happened to that? Today you have the Dubai Mall, one of the biggest malls. What happens to that? So I'm looking inspirationally. This is a city built. This is a community that is translating into energy, that is creating a hope for everybody who wants to live and work here. How do I...
What is the price that people have paid for expansion at that level, at that rate? What is the price?
At any point in time as an entrepreneur, you're not doing anything for free. The price of living in a decent place is for you to pay for it. And therefore, it's not about the price, it's about whether it will work for you.
Anand Kapoor, you agree with that? What is the price for this rapid expansion? Does rapid expansion come at the expense of governance, for instance? Good governance?
So should we talk about governance, or should we touch on the subject what Roland was trying to emphasize on?
Touch on that. Touch on governance.
So I believe what he's been trying to say is there has been a lot of good things happening around. And whereas there were a lot of important things being left out, or if not emphasized as much as they should have been, which in terms of publicity sometimes picks up the negative media. So whereas all the good things happened, a lot of these iconic structures being made in the last couple of years, the transformation and good things around the working force probably improved a lot more in the last couple of years. So it's a journey which we believe is happening. And secondly, on a business front, what governance probably, investor protection will always play a very vital role if we are strategically placing ourselves to be one of the more stable hubs for Africa. Because I believe there are quite a few contenders for it. So there are people who are already pitching to be it. And it's not easy. Time and again it has been said, the ease of operation is immense. So infrastructure, ease of operation is a result of investments done in last couple of years by the federal authorities. So it's not easy to replicate very fast in different parts of Africa. But the points that you have highlighted, if they have been taken care in the right time, we have an amazing opportunity to be one of that crucial hub.
Okay, Gulam Balam, if I could ask you to put on your economist's hat and talk about the others, perhaps, who are competing for this role as Africa's trading hub in the future. How does Dubai stack up against Johannesburg, Nairobi, London, other places, in your opinion?
So at the outset, let me just be appropriate and exchange pleasantries and say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to the audience. And secondly, just remind the audience that I'm an economist. So Mr. Barak earlier on this morning was quite dismissive of economists, and I'm very grateful in a sense that he's set a very low bar for me, and you don't have very high expectations of anything that I'm going to be suggesting. Thank you.
On the contrary, we have very high expectations sitting here.
Tim, if you'll allow me, I think some historical context would be appropriate because it would then position Dubai as part of this mosaic, as part of this constellation of cities and states that is embracing Africa. Many, over the last 1.5 days, will have realized that, say, between 1960 and 1995, productivity growth in Africa was a mere 1%. And naturally, GDP growth was around 1%, which was shallower than population growth, implying that per capita incomes, for the most part, were shrinking. So Africa went backward, while most of the world went forward. But by around the late 80s and the early 1990s, Africa too was engulfed in a variety of the megatrends that seem to have shaped so much of our world. So globalization, the World Wide Web, and China. So the earlier references of Africa's renaissance, the ascendancy, I suspect was built on the idea that China was industrializing and Africa would be a source, a repository of supplying commodities. But what it really suggested was Africa was going to become a part of the global supply chain, at least in terms of its first wave. Now, what we've witnessed over the last 20 years, I suspect, is unprecedented, unheralded in modern economic history. If you consider that, say, 20 years ago, a mere 1% of Africa's global trade was with that constellation of China, India, and Brazil. And let's use that as a proxy for emerging markets. A mere 1% of Africa's external trade relationships was with that basket of nations. And today, it is 25%. So there has been this really fundamental tilt in what we could call South-South relationships. But before I get too deeply seated in geographical references, I should also just mention two added things. The United States has seen its share of African trade halve in just the last 6 years. Europe, too, has seen its share of trade with Africa roughly half in the last 6 years. In other words, there's been a secular process in train of emerging markets engaging with Africa so much more vociferously. Since 2009, the Great Recession of that period, if anything, those new relationships have been galvanized, have been catalyzed. Now, earlier last month, we witnessed President Obama host the Africa-US Leaders Summit. And if one reflects on that, that was really a refresh, a restart, a recalibration on the part of the Americans, and a realization that America, for the first time in modern history, for the first time, the West was losing influence. The West was losing a sense of industrial or commercial command on the continent, being usurped increasingly by Asia. So what I'm, I guess, in a nutshell suggesting is we now live in a multipolar world. The idea of the 1990s, where the US had perhaps exaggerated influence, was a hegemon and the superpower, it is now a more developed, a more substantive, and a more broader conversation with multiple partners.
But still the largest economy in the world.
For another 15 years. But I think size is not necessarily what I'm seeking to emphasize. It's about gateways to the African opportunity, hubs to the African opportunity, as you've suggested. And I would argue, at least in these opening remarks, that the African need is so plentiful that there is, dare I say, as close to a seat at the table for everybody. So South Africa as a gateway status can only push that idea so far. It would be conceited for South Africa to suggest that it could be a gateway in the continent because, for example, South Africa is very meaningful in Southern Africa. Its trade associations, say, with Nigeria or Egypt in the north, are very brittle, very shallow relative to Southern Africa. So you could argue that South Africa, for Southern Africa aspirations, can be relevant. It's a journey, and I think some of my co-panelists suggested that. For the moment, Dubai offers a few things, and in the future, it could enhance its relevance. And it relates to a few things. Firstly, proximity matters. We're human beings. We hunger for convenience. We have anxieties about traveling, and we tire of it. So the proximity of Dubai to North Africa in particular, but also to South Africa, to Southern Africa, is material. The time zone is also relevant. And maybe just, again, it's only introductory remarks, I'll suggest the following. Dubai offers capital, but Dubai also offers a new mode of growth that is going to be necessary on the continent. So Africa cannot afford to develop the way the rich world developed over the last 300 years, or even, say, emerging markets developed over the last 30 years. There needs to be so much more technology content to the way Africa is going to develop, because Africa is poor. More than 20 nations have per capita incomes lower than $1,000. Price points to make markets are going to be lower. The packaging of products is going to have to be smaller. It's not a novel concept. Over the last 1.5 days, you will have learned that the nature of Africa's leap and the leapfrogging orientation is going to have to be essential. So today, Africa has got more mobile telephony than the United States. Africa is a pioneer in mobile money transfer. The point, quite simply, is that these technologies are creating the inclusivity that is going to be empowering and engendering of an increase in wealth and incomes per capita. There's many seeds of commonality with Dubai, but perhaps I'll just anchor on that one. The idea of novelty, innovation, the technological depth, and the pursuits at being a frontier market in Dubai can serve in the next wave of African growth, which is going to incorporate tele-education, telemedicines, services that have a technological richness to it.
So you would see this as a transitional hub?
The world is perpetually in transition, and for the moment there are certain benefits, and the very essence of this gathering and this conversation speaks to that tractability. But it's about what Dubai or the other poles can be for Africa in 10 or 15 years' time, as Africa develops, sees rising incomes, and sees tractability in infrastructure. But there must also be a recognition that Dubai will gain and will lose. You can almost imagine that in 2 or 3 years' time, we're going to be talking about a corridor that stretches from Kenya in the east to Senegal in the west. Multinationals that will see that corridor as the subset of their opportunity. They may not have a preference for North Africa. They may see South Africa perhaps as too mature, but from Mozambique into Kenya and across Senegal as the making of new markets. Africa is the only region on the planet that offers accelerated growth in every subset of consumer or industrial type. So if it is resources, even Asia has slowed in its growth rate of consumption, and I mean growth rate of consumption of resources. Africa is still to take that journey if we're talking about infrastructure. Low-end durable goods, Africa in this decade is probably likely to see accelerated take-up. High-end durable goods, that's still to come. In terms of accelerated growth rate, probably only in the 2020s and the 2030s. And high-end services, as we see the progression or the ascension of individuals into middle-income status, which has already taken place meaningfully over the last 15 years, and we think will double over the next 15 years, all of that ladder of consumption is going to become a reality.
You suggested there were certain things that Dubai could do to enhance its relevance as a hub. What for instance?
Well, I think if we look at the lessons of China and Brazil especially, there was a very strong state-led diplomacy that served as the beachhead for the private sector, distinct from India. India lacked government support, not totally, but it was India's private sector that really was the foray and embraced Africa with minimalist state-led support. If you look at, for example, former President Lula in Brazil, he visited Africa 6 times before his first official visit to Europe. He appreciated the opportunities and the trade sets, and it's unsurprisingly that Brazil has seen in excess of 20% annual growth rates in trade with Africa over the last 10 years. So the first is the fact that...
Dubai needs more diplomacy, needs to get out more.
And they are getting out. I think the last 1.5 days and the presence of Emirati leaders certainly signals a political will. So I'm suggesting that as a foray, as a beachhead, political capital can be meaningful in establishing that traction. But ultimately, the private sector, and I've been, for what it's worth, around the Middle East since Monday, from food producers to mining companies to Emirati entities, hunger to deliver power to Africa. The breadth of interest is there. It's in train.
Okay, we're going to go to your questions in a moment, so please do have your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you as soon as possible. There's a gentleman there who had his hand up first. If we could get a microphone to you.
Thank you, the panel. Thank you, Tim. My name is Ali Borhani. I run a strategic advisory firm in Dubai. Set it up in the midst of crisis. I think in the context of why Dubai is the hub, it's a lot about location, 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 but I think the biggest attraction for Dubai is the mindset, and the mindset. One thing that struck me in the past day and a half is that there's no Chinese in the audience today and yesterday. But if you take a snapshot of Terminal 3, you will see all the Chinese connecting to Africa. So the beauty about Dubai is that it makes it happen. And as Ghulam said, it's a lose and win game. And I'm sure that by the time that corridor comes, probably Iran is back into the world circuit and Dubai will work as a hub and again refilling that gap. So it's just an observation.
What aspects of mindset were you talking about?
I think the ability, for me, Dubai, I always make acronyms. For me, Dubai is dreaming, it's unconventional, it's bold, it's ambitious, and it's inviting. So for me, Dubai stands in those letters, and that's the mindset.
Ashish Thakkar, you share that? Mindset, mindset, mindset.
It is mindset, but I mean, it's not that we don't have the right mindset on the continent. I mean, we have a very, very solid mindset. We are a continent under transition.
You don't need to come here for mindset.
I personally don't think so. I think it's, let's take a step back, okay? Capital markets. When you're raising capital, I think the US is going to be extremely useful for us. I think Europe is very powerful. I think the Middle East and Asia, everyone's going to be, to Ghulam's point, I think we have to be welcoming to all angles in that respect. I'm very sensitive, as an African, I'm very sensitive that I don't want jobs being outsourced from our continent. So would I do business process outsourcing in Dubai? No, right? I mean, I do business process outsourcing today in Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda. I have manufacturing operations. I think Kenya is a fantastic manufacturing hub for the region, for example. Would I do manufacturing out of here to distribute into Africa? No. I mean, I'm sensitive towards that kind of stuff. But on a practical note, as I said earlier, operational convenience, in my opinion, operating out of Dubai for Africa is an extremely, extremely attractive proposition, a practical and a convenient proposition. I mean, I played a tiny, tiny role, and I was a big supporter of Dubai Expo 2020. I was a believer that Expo 2020, Dubai needed to win. And if Dubai won it, we as Africa would actually benefit more than anyone else winning it. If Russia won it, I don't think we would have got any relevance out of it. So I think, on a practical note, I think mindset is amazing in Dubai. I absolutely agree. But I don't think we as Africans are here because of that. I think it's convenience, operational convenience.
Overambitious, yeah, sometimes? They overreach themselves here in Dubai?
Well, we're all here, right? So the ambition has worked. And as a continent, we're also very overambitious, and we're going to get there too. So, I mean, it's everything's transitional, everything's ambitious. And you have to be in today's world, in my opinion.
Ghulam Balam, you looked as though you wanted to come in on that.
No, I was chuckling when you said over-ambition, and I think there's perhaps a few lessons from Dubai's history that Africans can choose to absorb. I think the first is that the seeds of this experience, of this experiment, was rooted in the oil finds in the 1970s, and that serves as a bedrock for the type of infrastructure you see today. Africa neglected its resources potential in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but that's changed materially now. It's astonishing if you consider that between 1960 and 1995, the more resource-rich an African country, the more likely its people were illiterate. And it speaks to the failure of leadership and the failure then to harness God-given resources. But that's changed materially now, and you see resources as one of the fundamental drivers of providing the capital for public sector spending and for infrastructure. And the second observation, I guess, is policy choices. So I always had the impression that Apple was the finest example of build it and they will come. Create the iPad, we don't quite know what we'll do with it, unleash it to the app developers, and no person is devoid of a tablet in the modern world today, or at least doesn't desire one. But that build it and they will come, that ambition. Africa is rich in natural resources. It is also well endowed in terms of the type of leisure and hospitality opportunities that can be harnessed. And African leadership requires that vision, because they're competing in the world, they're competing amongst each other, to put in place a policy endeavor that is visionary, that overreaches, simply because in the next 40 years, 25%, almost 25% of humanity is going to be resident on the continent. And they're going to need jobs, they're going to need a ladder and a bridge to survival. And the policy choices that have been made in this particular market serve merely as an illustration of that benevolence and their appetite for risk-taking, which is, I guess, one of the additional lessons I take from this market.
All right, okay. Gentleman over there, you had a question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Amadou Hott from Senegal. I run the Sovereign Fund. I lived here for a few years before going back to Senegal, and lived in many countries around the world, in New York, London, even Nigeria, and of course right now Senegal. I wanted to say that if I were to live again in another country outside Senegal, it would be Dubai. My question is the following. What was the weight of tax-free status in your decision to move your operation to Dubai, to run your office out of Dubai? Thank you.
Roland Agambiri, would you like to take that?
Personally, it's not about, if I understand him right, he's talking about tax system.
Yeah.
It's not about tax system that drove one to set up in Dubai. These are things that I said, the key elements of what you see in Dubai in terms of what Dubai has done over the years, and the fact that we are close to so many things. One, when you look at the market dissemination, it is easy for me to test a product right here in Dubai to be able to assimilate that in the African continent. It is easy for me to build a brand that is well accepted, again, back in Africa, because Dubai has also built a choice of a preferred city that people believe that Dubai has become a quality city to live in. This translates into products, this also translates into services. So whatever is being served in Dubai is about the global appeal.
So tax isn't a factor.
Taxes is not,
for you, it's not a factor.
It's not a factor. Because wherever you operate, even though you may see, it is just a it's more or less like a cosmetic that Dubai, you are not paying tax, but you probably may have to spend more expense, buy more things, more expensive right here in Dubai, and probably pay less where you are paying more tax.
Okay, Anna Kapoor, tax. Issue for you here?
So there are two components of tax. And it's a very valid question, and I believe it needs a little bit of segregation in terms of taxation. So there is a very favorable taxation strategy in terms of when you have a redistribution kind of hub. So it's very well planned the way Dubai has laid down that policy. And that's in line with the kind of free zones being created. So what is a lot important to me is airport free zone plays a very vital role, because you have got an ease of transaction when you are re-exporting to so many countries and you are in an airport free zone. So it plays a vital role. And similarly for Jebel Ali, where people are having large warehousing to do a similar kind of structure for redistributing all across in the region, as well as GCC. And secondly, the thing, no headquarters or people will come and establish here, because all the countries that we will have the operations will have their taxation policies to be adhered to. So I believe it's what he's saying. Nobody comes to Dubai for that sake.
Okay. All right. There was a gentleman over there had a question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vineet. My question is to Ashish. Ashish, when you were talking about 22 regional offices, is that because of the difference of cultural diversity within Africa which drives you to do that? Or one can still work on a hub and scope kind of a model where you have a centralized office and you service the other countries there?
Good question. I mean, I think, look, I mean, our regional integration programs, the East African Community, the SADC region, the ECOWAS region, we have COMESA, we have many regional integration programs which are really happening. In my opinion, I think the East African Community has been the most progressive. Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya particularly have taken an amazing lead on creating that one country, kind of one region, open border kind of mindset, which has been unbelievable. But I think at the same time, you know, our histories are so unique. I mean, my family is very, you know, we're Africans, I'm a fourth generation, but we're very East African in that respect. And, you know, the history in Rwanda and our history in Kenya and our history in Uganda and Tanzania is very, very unique. So all it is I think it's a matter of working in a culturally, socially responsible manner in that respect. For us, we've seen that regional integration we take advantage of when it comes to manufacturing and things of that nature, but otherwise we work very, very locally. So the hub and spoke model can work and does in so many cases. In my opinion, it's all about being very local in each market and therefore 22 regional offices.
Okay. More questions. Another question from there. Yes, lady there.
My name is Ana Lucia Lind, and I'm an international banker. I just want to say Dubai is not only a hub. For me, it's an example and leading mainstream to the rest of the world. I was born in the Caribbean, and I was raised in Colombia. I live in Switzerland at the moment. I live in Germany, and I have an office in Panama. As an international banker, being in Dubai for the first time in 2002, I have to say it has been the example to my life. It has been the country that have set apart the path in the mainstream of humanity. It has gone where nobody will take risk. I'm advisor for 2 ministers in Germany at the moment. I'm happy to trail them with me through the emerging market. And I'm happy to say I see how coward we are in Germany, how coward we are in Switzerland. I have to say amazing Dubai, not only as a mentor to all of us in investment banking. In the world of business, this is the place and the example which I give to Africa. When I speak with government with Africa and I give it to the panel, I realize that many of time they're bracing on something which you need to break it and is with understanding.
You have a question?
Yeah, I do. The question is, how could we get Africa to be the new Dubai? And this is not relying on none of us in here. It's relying on the people united with the government. How do each one of you think we could reach it?
Okay, all right, thank you. We get Africa to be the new Dubai. Do you even want that? Anand Kapoor.
I think it's like we've time and again discussed, Africa is 54 different countries. And in generality, we cannot influence the policy structure of 54 different countries. It's the vision of the leadership of one country which will eventually perceive this concept and make the journey forward.
Okay, did you want to come back on that? Did you want to follow up on that?
Yes, I accept your answer, but the question is all about for you all. How do you all could break into the government? I work with government, and I have never seen the government say, we're going to devote to our population to understand they need to be follow an example or path. We take Singapore, okay? How could we get to that point, being from an emerging country and go into a growing path? I am moving my residence to Dubai because it have given me an example. Tell me how Africa could move it.
Okay, Ashish Thakur.
I mean, I work very closely with a lot of governments. Our governments are moving it, believe me, right? We are on the right mindset. We have some amazing ministers, even in the crowd here today, who are great examples. So again, please, we cannot be generalized as a continent, right? I think we have so many amazing case studies on our continent of countries, government leaders who are truly making a difference, who want to leave behind a positive legacy. I have personally been active on the continent. I spend 20 days a month in Africa, every single month, and I've been doing so for the last 18 years. I have firsthand seen the transformation in our government's mindset and our countries evolving to become amazing, amazing destinations. So I think we're there. I think our governments are becoming better. There is always room for improvement, but we're on the right track. We're getting there.
So you don't think Africa needs lessons in government from Dubai?
I mean, I think it's, you know, we've got to, again, and this is the US-Africa Summit that President Obama hosted, and I'm going to be perfectly honest here. You know, it was an amazing conference, which the first time in history we had so many of our heads of state in the White House. I was a part of the business forum during that summit as well. And I was quite skeptical, to be honest. I was quite worried that my leaders are going to be going there and getting lectured by the US on how to go about things. And luckily we were not. It wasn't like that at all. It was a very constructive, progressive discussion because people realized that our continent is transforming. We have things like the Africa Union, we have the United Nations Economic Commission on Africa, we have the Africa Development Bank, we have our regional integration programs, and then we have our governments who are also doing amazing work. We are evolving. So,
okay. Lady in the front row. We'll just wait for a microphone, please.
Thank you. My name is Hannah Tete, and I'm the Foreign Minister from Ghana. If I were to ask you, what were the top 5 things that you think from a governance point of view we should put on the integration agenda? In the immediate, if you like, medium term, talking about the next 5 years, if we could focus on 5 things in order to make it easier for all of you to do business in Africa, what would those be?
I'd like to kick that. Anna Kapoor.
See, first of all, we are already doing a lot of work in Africa. So to precisely answer, you know, for example, I have...
Top 5 things. Give us 2 of them.
So,
and we'll go to somebody else for the other 3.
That's right. So first thing is in West Africa, ECOWAS is playing a major role. The ease of ECOWAS implementation is going to make a lot of decision on investments over there. And secondly, I believe the power generation is like a must-required thing for more investments to flow in our countries. You want me to carry on more?
No, that's fine. Roland Agambere. Got any more things?
Definitely. Government should directly partner with private sector to create cities like what we have seen in Dubai. Because like I keep on saying, Dubai has been created through the partnership between the visionary, the leadership, and that of the private sector. Apart from that, the financial system within Africa, there should be an opening within the banking sector where our banks are not able to capitalize at a certain rate to be able to carry large business, even when you want to operate at a certain level. And government should raise the amount of liquidity that banks have to hold to be able to work within Africa. Of course, electricity is a key point that needs to be done. The borders within Africa should be open so that across board you can move freely within the various zones.
All right.
Our other last thing is currency. Africa as a continent, if we can have one currency that can communicate within Africa, this will immediately accelerate growth across Africa.
That's asking a lot. That's asking a lot. Gulam Balam, that's asking an enormous amount, isn't it? One currency for Africa? Goodness.
We'll call it the Afro, right?
Yeah.
So I suspect when the question is how do we create a Dubai, maybe interpret it a little differently. What we're really asking is how do we reduce poverty and how do we create inclusive growth? Because I think that is an aspiration that all human beings would want for each other. But it's also an aspiration that secures individuals within their respective markets. It brings personal security, social security when we have those aspirations. And while a sure recipe for growth and success seems to have remained elusive, there's a few things that we know. And we know that the 6 fastest growing economies between 1995 and 2000 were low-income, non-resource economies. So a nation such as Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, Mozambique, those nations were the fastest growing in the time period that I've just mentioned, and I say they were non-resources. Mozambique is more freshly, more recently become a resource-founded nation, and we know other East African countries.
Looking for a piece of advice from you.
And so the question then is, what precipitated that growth with longevity, that buoyancy? And leadership, what you can do is just a few things. Firstly, policy stability, policy predictability, policy continuity, macroeconomic stability,
Democracies aren't good at that, are they?
Institution building. Those were the hallmarks of what gave those economies their thrust. And again, I emphasize, it was not resource-based or resource-driven growth. Then the second layer, if you'll allow me, Tim, very quickly. The telecommunication sector in Africa is symptomatic of a situation where the government created a constructive regulatory environment. We're happy to receive the licenses and then unleash the private sector to deliver. And it is that model which should serve as perhaps the poster child of what has singularly been the most powerful empowerment force for Africans. And in that, I guess, are lessons.
Okay, Ashish Thakur, have you got 1 point left for the Minister that hasn't been covered?
I think
by your colleagues?
harmonizing our laws and open migration policies where our people can move around freely across borders, I think, is crucial.
Okay, Minister, does any of that work for you? There's a microphone there, yeah.
There are 3 things for me that work in that. Harmonizing migration policy, energy, and Ashish, the last point that you made.
Laws.
About having better regulatory integration.
Yeah.
And the reason why
it's not going to happen, though, is it?
And the reason, no, it could. And the reason why, Mr. Balim, I'm not very enthused by the points you made is because those are for the nation. But I was asking for integration. Because we've had for decades an African unity agenda. Now, how do we make that agenda real if it doesn't deal with some of the bottlenecks that business is facing? And that's the reason why I was asking from a business perspective, from a regional perspective, if you like, a continental one. And those 3 are the ones that make most sense for me.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, in the time we have left, and we only have a few seconds left, I'm going to ask you to vote on the following question with your iPads, please. And the question is, there is not yet an obvious hub for the African region in the way that Dubai has become for the Middle East. Which location do you expect to play the biggest role as a coordinating hub over the next 5 years? A, Johannesburg, B, Nairobi, C, Lagos, D, Dubai, E, Istanbul, F, London, and G, Paris. Please take your pick, and we'll have a look at the vote in a second. Unsurprisingly, D for Dubai got 57%. Okay, well, we've had the verdict for the audience. Our thanks very much to the panelists for all their contributions. Thank you very much indeed. You do have feedback form on the iPad. Please use it. Lunch, that magic word, is now. It will finish at 1:30, and the next session will start shortly after that. 1:30 is your next session. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Thank you.
Sun and water